Section 2, Chapter 4, The War Connection. All we need is the right major crisis, and the nations will accept the New World Order. David Rockefeller. Getting a better grasp of economics is essential to gain a better understanding of this complex disinformation matrix we find ourselves within. The next intellectual move gets us into the domain of war. So we touched on some of the elements in earlier work, both in the book and videos that I've done, and some of the reasons why this play is seemingly used to help centralize power and create order out of chaos. So an example of this can be found in the World Trade Center buildings and bombings. So in '93, sorry. So one of the largest acts of domestic terrorism in U.S. history was the '93 bombings of the World Trade Centers in New York City. As it turned out, the FBI was fully aware of the bomb plot before the attack took place. I quote, "The Muslim group involved had been infiltrated by Ahmed Salem, a former Egyptian intelligence agency agent, who was hired by the FBI and ultimately paid $1 million. The FBI even provided the Egyptian with a timer for the bomb, prompting the Chicago Tribune to publish a report headlined, 'FBI tipster said he built New York bomb,' end quote." So another example is just the Second World War, really. And the bankers both supported and indirectly encouraged Hitler due to his vow to destroy communism. The bankers also created the communism that the German dictator vowed to destroy. So how is that possible? First, what proof can we find between Hitler and the bankers? One must look at the industrial conglomerate and German cartel IG Farben to get a bigger piece of the puzzle. IG Farben cooperated closely with Nazis, creating chemicals for them in the 40s. So in 1941, I quote, "An investigation exposed a marriage cartel between John D. Rockefeller's United States-based Standard Oil Company and IG Farben," end quote. Without the capital supplied by Wall Street, there would be no IG Farben in the first place, and almost certainly there would have been no Adolf Hitler in charge of the Second World War, rather. So this Farben cartel had 3 Wall Street houses that created it. And these houses, these Wall Street houses, were Dillon Reed and Co., Harris, Forbes and Company, and National City. So in other words, IG Farben, a company supplying goods for the German side of the war effort, was being heavily supported in and by American companies on American soil. And some of the goods being produced within this company were coming directly from Auschwitz. So IG Farben built a factory named Buna Chemical Plant that produced synthetic oil and rubber from coal in Auschwitz, which was the beginning of the SS activity, and the camps in this location during the Holocaust, end quote. At its peak in '44, this factory made use of some 83,000 slave laborers, and noted in the IG Farben trial documents. So further, the company produced a pesticide called Zyklon B, which was actually used in the gas chambers during the Holocaust. And it was IG Farben that actually held the patent for this chemical. So regarding the second question that I posited earlier, what proof is there with connecting the bankers in America to the communism that the Russians vowed to attack? So Anthony Sutton, drew a connection from State Department files, and these figures within the files show within Wall Street and other documentation that a certain number of high-level bankers and capitalists supported the Bolsheviks, while simultaneously in the media supporting or presenting the face of an anti-Bolsheviks movement. So that was sort of a quote there. Moreover, the J.P. Morgan Company illegally bought Bolsheviks gold in the United States. This same company, J.P. Morgan, then freed Trotsky in this. He actually brought him in a sealed train with approximately $6 million in gold at that time, which is a lot more than it is now. Brought Lenin over to start the revolution in Russia, and the whole process supported by Max Warburg and his funding, which was another American banker, German-born, with an interesting connection with his brother, who was one of the architects for the Federal Reserve initially. A third example is the Gulf of Tonkin. There's many others, but this is the third one. So Daniel Ellsberg was a United States military analyst when he leaked papers detailing a Pentagon top-secret program while working at the RAND Corporation in '71. So it provided detailed information regarding the Vietnam War. Ellsberg secretly photocopied a number of documents. These documents demonstrated, among other things, I quote, that the Johnson administration systematically lied not only to the public but also to Congress about a subject of transcendent national interest and significance, end quote. Also another quote, Johnson's administration had systematically lied not only to the public but also to the Congress, end quote. They revealed that they knew the war wouldn't be won, that there wouldn't be a far higher number of casualties than ever reported, and most shockingly, it showed directly that the government had lied to both Congress and the people on issues of radical significance. This is compounded by a recent release of new information by the Senate's Foreign Relations Committee in July of 2010, containing 1,100 pages that provide in-depth transcripts detailing how the American senators at the time were outraged by the leadership regarding the '64 Gulf of Tonkin incident, and that was quoted information. Ellsberg then went so far as to say that the senators that they should be prepared to go to war to put an end to the Vietnam War. And Ellsberg had access to extensive amounts of classified material, and upon reflection and analysis of the material, he said to a witness the following: "The public is lied to every day by the president, by his spokesperson, and by his officers. If you can't handle the thought that the president lies to the public for all kinds of reasons, you couldn't stay in the government at that level, or they'd make you aware of it. The fact is, presidents rarely say the whole truth, and essentially never say the whole truth of what they expect and what they're doing, and what they believe and why they're doing it, and rarely refrain from lying actually about the matters." End quote. To understand this comment better, we need to go back to the history of the Gulf of Tonkin incident. So this event brought the escalation and entrance into the Vietnam War, and the Geneva Convention having been signed in '54. So I can't pronounce his name. Ngo Dinh Diem, the president of Vietnam at the time, was indeed a controversial figure among the people of the country, which included Buddhists who were skeptical of many of his followers. President Lyndon B. Johnson cited the attacks to persuade Congress to authorize broad military action in Vietnam, but historians in recent years have concluded that the August 4th attacks never actually happened. That's a quote. Historians note that a few days after the supposed attack, he told George W. Ball, I quote, that Under Secretary of State, "Hell, those dumb, stupid sailors were just shooting at flying fish," end quote. What's more, despite the questioning, the committee decided in the end to effectively conceal the truth. So in Senator Church's words, they concluded the following, I quote, "If the committee came up with proof that an attack never occurred, we have the case that we can discredit the military in the United States and further discredit and quite possibly destroy the president." I quote, "The big forces in this country that have most of the influence and run most of the newspapers and are oriented towards presidency will lose no opportunity to thoroughly discredit his committee." End quote. So on August 3rd, 1964, President Lyndon Johnson discussed with the Defense Secretary of the time, Robert McNamara, in two separate conversations. And in these two separate conversations, they were taped and released and declassified in 2001. So in short, historians now are in general agreement that the president knew that the Tonkin incident never actually happened, but further, they could spin this event in such a way so as to gain justification for airstrikes and full-scale entrance into the Vietnam War. And there's been a word coined to define this, and that's a false flag terrorist attack. So I'll get into another important concept in the next video. Namaste. Blessings.